Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's Family and Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee, taking place here at County Hall today, Thursday, the 26th of May. We have an agenda which we're going to run through this morning. If I can just take members, first of all, through some key points on the agenda. You'll see within the part one this morning that there are membership terms of reference which include a list of the members on the committee. We have a new member who's just joined us, Councillor Richardson, Margaret Richardson, who joins us, and Margaret is a county councillor in Coopan in Blyth. So welcome to the committee. I'm sure you'll find it a very interesting period to be on the committee. The other point which I want to take out from the composition, which shows that the numbers of councillors and representatives on the committee, is I think this is an opportunity for us to have a bit of a development session, just a bit of a refresh about what we do, why we do it, how we do it, the partnerships which are involved. So I was wondering if perhaps Audrey Kingham, Director of Education, could actually arrange for that to be done for membership. I think it's always a good thing to actually have that refresher. I just wondered if we could pick that up, Audrey.
Yes, Chair. I've no issue. I'll work with Chris on that, and we'll work with Graham. Graham's on leave this week, but we'll make sure we pick that up for the members of the committee. Thank
you very much. And again, that links into the terms of reference as well, which are indicated within the report. So we will diary in a development session, and I think it'd be really good if we're all able to attend that. And I think it also will give us an opportunity to think about some of the work programme as well going forward. So we now move on to the substantive agenda. So item number 2, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies this morning?
Yes, Chair, I've received apologies from Councillors Ball and Councillors Dunbar.
Thank you very much for that. We now move on to the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 21st of April and the 5th of May, which are contain pages 1 to 8. I'll just run through them page by page. As a point of accuracy, if anyone wants to pick anything up, please feel free to let me know. Pages 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the meeting of 5th of May, pages 1, 2, 3, and 4. I don't see any hands, so on that basis, I will sign those off as a true record of those 2 meetings. Item number 4, standing item, disclosure of members' interests. Everyone has filled in a member's declaration form. We know all about that, but if there is anything on the agenda this morning that you feel that you haven't already disclosed, now is your opportunity to make that known. I'm not seeing any hands, so I will take that as read. Next, item number 5, which is the forward plan of key decisions. Chris Angus, you're going to take us through that one.
Thanks, Chair. There's one item on the forward plan that will be coming to facts in July, and that's the recommission of an integrated sexual health service. It's something that would probably ordinarily go to health and wellbeing, but because it falls within children's health and teenage sexual health, it's going to come to facts instead. And that's the only thing on the forward plan that's relevant for this committee.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We now move on to the substantive part of this morning's agenda, and we're going to have a presentation from David Street, who's Deputy Director of Education, and that's on the Education Strategy Board annual update. On your agenda pack, it is pages 13 to 20. So, David Street, if you'd like to take that presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to bring this, it's a brief report, but hopefully a comprehensive one as well. The Education Strategy Board, you will have heard and mentioned before. Now we came to facts, I think December 20, with a view to setting up a sector-led governance and challenge model. The essence of the Education Strategy Board is that it's representatives from every sector across the education spectrum. So from early years through to college representation, all different types of schools in between, academies, maintained schools, church schools. We've also got a good proportion of governors, as well, who also work with the on the board, and the overall viewpoint of the board is one where they look at the strategic development of education and skills going forwards and influence that from their perspective. There are so many different perspectives on the education spectrum, and this board is one that has pulled together the viewpoints. Sometimes it's challenging of each other, which is absolutely right, and so it should be. But the board itself creates a mandate, because the things that are discussed and any outcomes that come from the board are from the sector, right across the sector, and it's a voice which is having more impact as we go forwards. It was just prior to the pandemic, actually, that it was agreed that we would move forwards and develop the board. We did operate through parts of the pandemic. There was, but really it's in the last year, the last 12 months, where we've really gained some traction. We started off looking at a range of challenges that were for Northumberland, from the education sector in Northumberland. Started off with a viewpoint of looking to support disadvantaged learners and the offer for them. We were looking at secondary outcomes, and we were also looking at the inclusion agenda, support in and around exclusions and trying to minimise that. The SEND agenda is also incorporated, and the post-16 provision for Northumberland. So really broad spectrum. The board helped and supported in rationalising those quite broad areas into the education and skills 12 priorities. And actually, as the board has developed, its key work really is in and around exploring those key priorities, exploring the progress made by officers and made by those delivering on the front line, to make sure that A, those 12 priorities are the right priorities for Northumberland, and B, that we are actually making a rapid progress in those areas. One of the initial priorities actually was in and around, as an example, was in and around SEND inspection and doing well in the next SEND inspection. As we actually have achieved that, I think that was priority 5. The board actually came forward with a replacement priority for that one, to stick with the 12. I suppose it could go to more as we go forwards. The other elements just to note from this report is the work plan. So there are a number of subgroups which meet every term, and then get to the nub of the priorities, I suppose, and the actions, and they report back to the board. So it's the sector reporting back to the board, which is representative of all the sectors, and we're really working to make sure that that's not explicitly officer-led. You know, the whole point of the board isn't that it's officer-led, I suppose. And then really, if I can just bring you to the conclusion section. In the first full year, really, the board has got to grips with things. It really has given a new voice to all areas of the education sector, and I think, from my perspective, voices are being heard much more than ever before, and representation is available. We've identified areas of focus from the working groups. We've overseen the progress in the key priorities, and rewritten a priority that was achieved. We've taken part in support and challenge of both officers and of schools and settings. We've highlighted areas of best practice, and I think there's a lot more to do on that, actually. But we've also highlighted specific areas for further work. So in and amongst the priorities, there are some cross-cutting themes, and certainly transition is really high on everybody's agenda, and that has come out through the board. Everybody's talking about it, and everybody needs to get that those transitions as effective as possible. Secondary outcomes remain a key element for us, and our relationship with academies. The board did finalise, for example, a data sharing agreement to ensure that we get very timely data back for the end of key stage outcomes, particularly at the secondary sector. I think we really have cemented the role of the board. Really keen to get feedback from this group in terms of any other areas that I think we could develop in. It is the first year, but we're really getting traction, and I think next year it'll be even more impactful, if you like, and I look forward to coming back and telling you about that at that point in time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I have any questions, comments? Guy Renner-Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. This is a perfect example of David said the County Council. This isn't officer-led. The County Council is part of this wider group, but we are the larger part. Over the years, the education sector has become more fragmented with local authority schools, academies, free schools. This is a way of bringing everyone back under one umbrella and working collaboratively for the best in the best interests of all of the children in Northumberland, whether they be in an academy or a maintained school. The results of this board are quite clear to see from the next item on the agenda, which I think we'll have a lot more to discuss about.
Any other comments? Mr. Hodgson and then John Sanderson.
Yeah, thanks. No, I was just looking through the key priorities there, and I'm involved in the governing body of a school in a very, very, very deprived area. And one of the big concerns you've got down is in target, or this priority number 6, we'll work across early years sector to ensure all children are school ready. Have you got a timescale for that, and what sort of strategies and possible additional resources have you got into that one? Because that is a serious, serious commitment, that.
Yes, it is a serious commitment. Since I've been involved with the early years team and working in the early years sector across Northumberland, it has been an absolute key priority to ensure as many learners as possible are school ready. And I think there's probably an additional phrase to add into that, and the school is ready for the child. So we actually have seen quite a significant increase in the key measure for the end of the early years. So a good level of development. We are ahead of the national average, and 6 years ago we weren't. So we have crept upon and beaten that. The other area which is particularly impressive in our last set of results was that actually the disadvantaged gap, so the gap between pupil premium learners and non-pupil premium learners, the only key stage of all of our key stages where that gap closed, it didn't disappear, but the only place where it actually closed was at the end of early years. The early years team has grown in both numbers and overall capacity. The Katie Watson has been an excellent lead as the early years advisor. We've got a great blend between there's 374 early years providers, 108 of them are schools, so schools with nurseries, but the others are combination of childminders and private, voluntary, independent sector. Some of those are quite large organisations, actually, nationwide organisations. But the work we've done in and around early years, the work that we've done in and around developing the Northumberland Passport, which is something that the Education Strategy Board are very keen on. The last meeting, they were recommending that the Early Years Passport, which we developed, is a digital platform for both assessment and monitoring of development, all targeted towards being school ready. And all we've got about 90% of the providers using that platform now, and it actually records from 2 years of age, if the learner is at 2 years of age, and whether they're on track or not to be school ready, to gain a good level of development. And actually the passport, it's a massive undertaking. It's been a huge amount of training and work with folk to get it delivered. But what the Education Strategy Board were indicating was that they'd like the passport to continue into Key Stage 1. Right.
And actually on our send inspection, the QCA inspector said, oh, I was just talking to the early years team about that passport. That's brilliant. Why isn't there a 0 to 25 passport? Well, everyone had a slight heart attack at that, but it was good that he did have that viewpoint. There's a methodology which is telling us all, and telling us collectively, and telling the teachers individually whether the child is on track to meet their potential.
So is this passport unique to Northumberland, or is this something that's been tried and tested across other authorities?
There are different versions around, but nobody's got it down to where we've got it to. North of Tyne are going to pilot it in Newcastle and in North Tyneside in some of their partnerships. It's a really exciting development. It did start, I had meetings with the earliest team, and I wanted to know what proportion of learners were on track. And then I handed it to them as the experts in the field to decide on the, it's well based in developmental research, but in a nutshell, it has a series of ICANN statements, which are really clear. Anybody can observe a learner from any background, whether you're a PVI or a school, and can decide whether the learner is meeting their ICANNs or not, and therefore put into interventions. And those ICANNs, over time, lead up to a good level of development, which is the gold standard for us, and school readiness.
You happy with that?
Absolutely, yeah.
So if I can, before I bring John Sanderson in, can I just draw you on something you said? So it's about school ready, but also the schools being ready for the child.
Yeah.
So that data on the passport, is there a data sharing protocol with some of our education settings? So when they look at the ICANN, those measures, you know, being able to kind of form sentences and what have you, is that shared with them so they can actually think, are we actually ready to receive this student?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was another, you know, I mentioned before the strategy board, we were very keen on transitioning in all its formats. Well, actually, the transition from nursery into the reception year, we do have a key stage here, which is split between, for a lot of learners, the private sector, and then into schools for 1 year for a lot of them. Not for all, because lots of schools do have nurseries as well. But into 1 year. So we do have a split key stage. And yes, of course, the assessments come through. And this is a really key element in terms of schools getting the same information from possibly a range of providers. So they're not looking at loads of different formats to get the information so they can hit the ground running in September. In addition to that, there's a send module as well, which also will highlight any send interventions that's been for that learner, the impact of that. And so again, so the next holder of the baton, in this case usually schools in the reception year, can pick that baton up as easily as possible.
Thank you. So I'll bring John Sanderson in, then Councillor Dale.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. David, on page 17, at the conclusion, point 7, you mentioned one of the issues is relationship with academies. I wondered if there were any specific issues with academies, and also some of the academies are part of regional multi-academy chains. Does that create any particular issues? Thank you.
I'll give a viewpoint. Audrey might want to come in as well. We have really good relationships with our academies in Northumberland. It's not an us and them. And I also think that one of the good things to come out of the pandemic is the fact about how closely we work together, because we were all in the same boat, and it really came through there. Sometimes, if there are any challenges, maybe it's about timeliness. So that an academy chain or an individual academy might be very focused on their own agenda. We might be trying to work with them, the data sharing, for example. So it's not that they won't share the data with us, because we're good colleagues and we work well together, but there's sometimes, we just need to be really clear that timelines for bits and pieces are agreed in the first place, and then it's easier for us all to follow and keep caught up. We sometimes get, let's say, some data from our maintained schools quicker, but we can't finalise on the work in and around that, because we've got some other bits and pieces coming in. Sometimes that's with attendance as well, but that's not strictly academy based either. But It's just that transfer of information in the most timely way possible, so we can feed it back to schools to help them support going forwards as well. But there's no major issues.
Lovely, thank you.
Councillor, oh, sorry, Audrey, you wanted to come in, then I'll bring in Councillor Dale.
Thank you. I was just going to endorse what David said. Essentially, no significant issues to highlight in any way, shape or form, and never a problem that isn't able to be solved by speaking to either the head teacher or the CEO in any way, shape or form. And on the odd occasion where, you know, we have waited for a bit of data, it has just been a follow-up and we've received that. And actually, one of the things that David and I did coming into post was we made a pledge to go out to all academies and build that relationship and ensure that we were working together. Ultimately, we have statutory responsibilities for every child in Northumberland. And yes, there are some devolved responsibilities into our head teachers in maintained schools and their chairs of governors, and clearly some responsibilities for CEO of MATs. But that's not a barrier in any way, shape or form. We work together.
Yeah, and on that point about academies, we had a meeting a few weeks ago with the Regional Schools Commissioner, and she's going to be coming to the committee in October. It's not on the work schedule, but we'll pick it up later. And it's overview about academies, not necessarily about individual schools, so we'll do a briefing in advance of that. But again, that shows the level of the cooperation that we're now getting with the regional academies, and particularly the Commissioner as well, but that will be in October at our meeting. Councillor Dale.
Thank you. Just very quickly to add to number 9, we'll work in partnership with our staff service to ensure our children are supported through social care, virtual school and community hubs supporting their health and well-being. One of the big things that we've always said, and for a long time, is that we have to actually build the resilience up in children. And that's the most important thing from when they're little to actually going out and looking for jobs and things and become more resilient about the world outside, because it's changing dramatically. And that's one of the things I think since 2013 it was built in and started to be built in, and now I see it going out. And I think that, you know, every child, however good they are, I mean, even a child learning to do their laces up, it's great for them. You know, and it should be, you know, it's something they've learned and they've developed and they can do now. And that's a tiny thing, but then you get further right up. But it's actually that resilience. So you can take the knocks when you go through school, because actually that can do more harm to children's education if they're not resilient to the world or the school environment, etc. So it was just one of those words to put back in again. Because I just think that makes, if you build the children's resilience up, that makes it so much easier for teachers, for everybody, for future.
David, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just I'll take that forwards. So,
Will you? Because I just think it's so important, because, you know, you need to be resilient now, and, you know, whether it's sort of being somebody saying, no, you can't, and just get people emotionally, etc., become resilient.
I'll share that as feedback for the board. For their consideration.
Would you? Thank you, that'd be lovely.
Yeah.
And I think just as we draw this to a conclusion, page 20 of the report, which is the Appendix 1, Education and Skills Priorities, Councillor Dale was just alluding to one of them there. There's some very good key benchmarking that the board is working towards, which includes SEND. It's including linking with career pathways. It's about our early years provision. There's, you know, 12 key really good measures there. So I look forward to getting a further update at the committee about that work. So well done on that point. Audrey, you wanted to come in as well.
Yes, Chair, can I just say that when we do the development session, from the education and skills perspective, we will very much focus on those 12 priorities. I think it's really important that we have that, you know, 0 to endless age bracket that we are responsible for. Ultimately, that includes, you know, Councillor Dale talking about careers, resilience for our young people, but also for our adults out in the county as well. We have that responsibility. So we will focus on all of those aspects. I would hope to, and I use this word carefully, expose all of the work that we do to ensure that you've got a full breadth and understanding of the depth of what is dealt with across the directorate.
Thank you very much for that. So in terms of the report which we've been asked to look at, we're asked to review the performance, comment on the board and give further direction, and I think we've done all three there. So on that point, I'm happy to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item number 7 in your papers, pages 21 to 44, and that's the impact of the school improvement team. And David Street, you're going to take us through this again. Yeah, David, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. The report gives the key position of the School Improvement Service, but to add a bit more flesh to the bones, I think it provided a presentation. Dave Cookson, my colleague here, is the head of the School Improvement Service, and we've worked on this together to get to the point. So if there are any super difficult questions, I'll be able to refer to Mr Cookson there, and he'll be able to help us out. In October 2013, there was a focused inspection of Northumberland schools. So this was an inspection of the performance of the local authority as a whole, and the way they did that was by going straight to schools, inspecting lots of them en masse over a 2-week period, and then using that as well. That's the outcomes we've got from those reports. Therefore, that's the outcome from the school improvement team as a whole and the local authority that employs them. It didn't go very well in 2013. There were a number of issues that were highlighted, a lack of challenge, a lack of confidence in the local authority not knowing its schools well. And it was a tough time, and it was quite tough for those schools that fell into that inspection round, because a number of them did drop the wrong side of a grade, and so there were some challenges there. That is quite a long time ago now, and what I'm pleased to be able to say is that the position that was described at that point in time, we couldn't be any further away from that in the reality of today, and hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate that in the presentation here and in the report that you've already read. There's a slight delay on the presentation. Brilliant. So here you can see the team as it currently stands. We have managed to collect together a group of head teachers and support staff who are absolutely at the top of their game. Some of these were heads in Northumberland, some from other areas across the northeast, and we've also, a bit further than that, I think Damien came up from London to take this post. They've really taken the bull by the horns. They are supremely well respected across the sector, and I'll give you a little bit more information about how the support of schools occurs. But all of this team have some key skills that they work with, and there is hot competition to attempt to get them into schools. And you know, it's quite often, oh, is Louise available? Oh, etc., because schools want to be able to access this team. Very well respected, and quite rightly so, because there's a whole host of experience and demonstrated impact. You'll note that most of the team are called school improvement leaders, and actually the golden thread through this entire report and through the operation of the team is the fact that they all support leadership. Now, that could be leadership at head teacher level, but also at middle leader level and at class level as well. So that's the golden thread running through, and I think probably, I will demonstrate where we've made some improvements in terms of Ofsted outcomes later on, but I think those schools that are well led get good Ofsted outcomes. It's not a simple thing, it's a simple thing to say, it's not a simple thing to achieve, but well-led schools get good Ofsted outcomes, and that is a reflection of the good outcomes for the learners, which is the most important thing. This team work, as I say, collectively, and they work with all schools and are available to all schools. They also will work very closely with a number of schools for who purchased the school improvement SLA, and they will visit those schools on a really regular basis in order to monitor the progress of those schools with a lot of challenge actually going alongside that. In addition to these folk here, that we've got a highly regarded school improvement service and a lot of demand for the SLA. We also have some external school improvement partners who work completing exactly the same work in exactly the same format, and we work together with them. And that, again, just adds to the variety that we've got, so we really can highlight the right school improvement partner for the right school at the right point of its particular journey. Strengths of the team, I have mentioned a few of them already. We are highly linked with EF and other research-based organisations to ensure that what we're delivering is absolutely the cutting edge of educational practice. And we continue to and always have had a really strong knowledge of the Ofsted inspection framework, and we've got several members of the team now who are Ofsted inspectors, and again that's really useful. Some of the external school improvement partners that we use, a lot of them are Ofsted inspectors as well, and that's why we use them. What we do, again, I've mentioned a couple of things on this list already, but we do some statutory functions around moderation, Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. We support school leaders throughout each and every day. We really are in a much stronger position in revolving around Ofsted. I can say that when I started in post, there were some really challenging conversations with Ofsted because they didn't think that Northumberland was delivering well enough. Again, that's something that's completely changed. We work really closely. We know the Ofsted inspection teams really well. We work with them really closely within school. They value our opinion across the board. If there's something they're not sure about on an inspection, or for one reason or another, the school's not demonstrating its strength in a particular area, we know that there is a strength in that area. Again, we regularly influence there, and our word is taken as evidence in many, many cases. We support SACRE. There's a full training programme, both virtually and in face-to-face. And schools, those that are in the SLA in particular, can join those at a tiny fraction of the cost of a private provider. We've got the governance team, ICT team, equalities team as well, all linked in very closely with school improvement. And we support governors in particular, but have a whole range of specific groups, briefing groups, in and around different specialities that are required by schools. Just a couple of words on the pandemic. I think I can't speak specifically, but I have colleagues working in other local authorities who struggled through the pandemic, head teachers who felt on their own and trying to meet the health challenges and the guidance challenges and so on. I would hope, and I do, feel free to go out and test me on this one, but I would hope that Northumberland schools did feel very well supported throughout the pandemic. We tried to look after those leaders in particular. We were acutely aware that a lot of the schools, for key workers included, were virtually open 365 days a year. That they weren't getting breaks and bits and pieces in and around there. You'll remember the guidance that came out on a daily basis, often multiple documents with fine detail in it, which they had to respond to from a health and safety perspective, of course, but we were able to cut through some of that and share some of the details in a more easily readable format. We delivered lots on digital devices. We continued our training programme, and yes, I would suggest that the schools did feel well supported through the pandemic. We had a good relationship before. We'd built that relationship back up, and then I think the pandemic possibly cemented that. Just a little bit of a breakdown of some Ofsted inspections over time. So just back to August 2017, I'm not going to go through every figure, but I think the element to look at here is the fact that in 2017 we were below the national average for good and outstanding outcomes. In April 22 we're above the national average, and that movement is significant. We could have gone back even further in time and seen an even further improvement, but I think this is just more relevant for where we are at the moment. And those that required improvement in 2017, the number of them has clearly decreased, and actually the numbers of schools that are not good or outstanding, we are now below the national average for that, i.e. we're doing better than the national average for not performing well. One of the other keynotes I think to bear in mind with this is, though we do currently have 19 schools that are deemed less than good in their last full Ofsted inspection, all of those schools have been had monitoring visits and are deemed to be taking effective actions. So they are en route back to good, is basically a shorthand for what taking effective actions would indicate. And so we would say that we're well placed to move to good at the next Section 5 inspection. And actually that wasn't the case in the past. In 2016 we had 74 schools judged less than good, or we believed they were at risk of being less than good at their next inspection, and we weren't sure that those schools were going to do well next time round. So not only is there a smaller group, but that smaller group is doing much better than their peers from a few years ago. Just some really up-to-date stuff. Some current Ofsted performance. You can read the bullet points for yourselves, but I think there's 11 there. 10 of them are all good measures and success. There's one of them that wasn't so much of a success. I think we've definitely got a theme where we know our schools much better, and we certainly want to be in a position where we catch them before they fall. It's definitely a priority for us. At the same time, the Ofsted inspections are quite rightly very rigorous operations, and in a 2 days, if the school doesn't quite get to demonstrate where it is, any school has the opportunity to drop a grade. But I think we're probably really well placed to see that anyone that does undergo that and has an outcome that they weren't looking for, were very swift in turning that around. The fact that we don't have many slip would also indicate that we're in there first before the slip occurs. And just to mention, I mentioned the SLA for school improvement. Almost all of the maintained schools in the local authority purchased the SLA. We make it cost effective for those schools, and most schools couldn't do without it in many ways. It is a partnership between the local authority and the schools, and they value that. We also have, not all, but a good number of our academies also purchased into the school improvement service. No schools get forced into it. It's a service, and it's offered to schools, and they choose. If we weren't so good at it and someone else was offering better, we would recommend they went to somewhere else. But actually we promote the team as we've got it and say this is what we're offering, and the schools come to us. We want to continue with that, obviously. There is a small fly in the ointment coming forwards with that, though. So we've got some challenges. The school improvement monitoring and brokering grant is a grant from central government that has underpinned a lot of school improvement work and services. The
the grant has already been reduced by 50% in April just gone, and will be reduced to zero for 23-24. It currently covers roughly, it's growing a little bit, but roughly around 50% of our income, the rest coming from SLA payments. We've got a number of plans in place to minimise the impact of the withdrawal of that grant. We've just recently, for example, done some work in Cumbria, which obviously brought additional funds and income into. We want to continue to expand our school improvement services, and we've just sort of recommissioned with one of our academy groups to offer school improvement for them on a longer term basis. So we do have some income streams that we can get into to try and minimise the impact, but I do want to raise this with facts, with a viewpoint of if you do agree and recognise some of the work of this team is of the high quality, that we also may need to think about it from a financial perspective to ensure its longevity. A couple of comments from some Ofsted reports. Positively recommending the local authority providing the support that it is, and it's reflective of some of the comments I made earlier. From the head teachers themselves, again, we ask for feedback at the end of every report, and sometimes we might write a report for a school that's quite challenging, but even when that happens, we often get a thank you from the school and from the governing team and from the head teachers in particular, in terms of the supportive way we might have managed to challenge them. Just got a slide there with the key priorities of the 12 priorities we mentioned before with the Educational Strategy Board, the ones that are the main focuses for school improvement, and the school improvement team feed back into the strategy board on progress in and around those areas. And we do also have some opportunities coming our way, some brand new opportunities. There will be an opportunity for, and off the press this week, Audrey might add some details to this later on, an opportunity for local authorities to become more involved in setting up multi-academy trusts. And actually we would, the School Improvement Service as we have it, is exceptionally well placed to support the setup of multi-academy trusts and to ensure that takes the quality we've got in Northumberland even further. Got a few bullet points for next steps. Want to continue to expand the number of schools engaging with the school improvement team. It's pretty high at the moment, but we're looking cross borders for that as well. Increase that income stream and also share best practice, actually. Further develop consultancy work with other local authorities. The passport might do that, as mentioned earlier, as an example. Work with the director to establish the school improvement function in any potential MAT in the future. Build upon the success and continue to support schools to improve the corporate KPIs at headline level. I've talked about Ofsted outcomes and a little bit about, so I suppose, academic outcomes, but destination data, making sure that every learner is well prepared for adulthood. These are all aspects that are the key focus of the school improvement team, and I think we're better placed than ever to ensure that our young people go on to form really strong key members of our community going forwards. We'll get as many Ofsted inspectors on the team as possible, and the finances I mentioned before, we want to secure those finances to ensure that we've got at least maintain the capacity of the team as we speak. There were some recommendations in the report, so this is just bullet points from those. You've asked to review the performance, comment on the team's ability to support the quality of education, and give us further direction, please, for other options that we can develop further, and possibly consider the funding implications.
Audrey or David, did you want to come in on anything? Audrey, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just to endorse David's report and presentation to everybody. We are exceptionally lucky across the whole of Northumberland. So school improvement leaders, not just with the local authority, but across our academies and our diocesan partners as well. So we all work really well together. So our children are exceptionally well positioned and our schools well positioned. I work with lots of colleagues nationally, and not everybody has the calibre of candidates that we have in Northumberland. So we are very lucky indeed. Luck isn't part of it. It's about how you structure that, how you manage it. And David and Dave together have taken this team to an exceptional level and beyond. All of the team, Dave included, are through the initial gateway for Ofsted inspection. 2 of the team already are, I think the technical term is have their badges, and the rest I'm sure will follow very shortly. And David is absolutely right. So there are opportunities for local authorities to bid into DFE to become part of the test and learn phase for multi-academy trust within local authorities, and following endorsement from our lead member and cabinet, we will go through that and come to this committee, and we will consider take it moving forward to be part of that test and learn phase, and we will be very well placed with the resources that we have available as a result of that. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Guy Renner-Thompson, Paul Rickard, then Councillor Dale, and Mr Hodgson.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I need to overstate how proud I am of this report. We made education a key priority when we were elected in 2017. This is the outcome of this. It is our role as councillors to set the direction. We said we wanted to see improvement in education. We made sure the team had the resources to do it. We've provided regular challenge and prodded them and poked them and probed them and asked them, how are you doing this? And they've come back and they've delivered the results. To see the number of our schools at good or outstanding above national average, where in 2017 they were below national average, is testament to the hard work of everyone in this room and beyond. The elephant in the room is, of course, the funding. I took the time last night to look up the Department of Education reasoning for this. They were saying that people were using the grant, local authorities were using the grant out with the defined parameters of the grant, and therefore you don't need it, so we're taking it away. And the consensus was, while everyone sort of agreed with the logic, they were still very unhappy that they were losing the money. But we've already had this discussion within Cabinet, we've already had this report, and we are committed to keeping the service going, turbocharging it. We've asked the Section 151 officer to go away and look at the next set of budgets for the council and see how we can work in the money to fund the school improvement service, because we recognise it's such an important service, and I would hope that the Facts Committee would endorse that and give us another stick to say that we need to keep this service going. Thank you.
Paul Rickard.
I think, Chair, I just wanted to welcome the report and echo some of what Guy's already said. I think it has been transformational since 2013. I think there's a completely different place now for the local authority. I welcome the comment turbocharge, because my concern in all of this is that I think the team are brilliant now, and I think you have some excellent people on that team, I really do. And I welcome the fact that we work in partnership with the local authority. My concern is what you've basically said, Guy, is we all know that 50% of the grant's gone. It's going to go again, I guess, from our perspective. And I say ours because they are our children. And again, Audrey said ours, and Dave and David always say that. And I think together, I guess that commitment of the finances to give schools the security to know that the service they buy into today will be there tomorrow. Because I think whilst the authorities now back up at the top of its game again, it's how do you, as an administration, say actually the funding's going to be here for the long term? Because it's so easy to take your eye off the ball but not have the funds to do it. And I guess from our perspective as a committee, there has to be that push from all of us to say, how do you maintain this? And also, I know it's a challenge, but almost to go above and beyond, because there will be points at which there is a dip in the system. And is there a reserve by which officers can dip into to say, actually, on this occasion, we need to target support to this entity, and that costs money. So I think from the perspective outcome of this, I think it's a great report. I think the transformation, and I think that's the right word, transformation, but can we now make sure that the funding is locked in for the next few years at least, so that schools have faith and confidence to know it's not going to disappear?
Thank you for that. I think that's a comment which I don't necessarily need a response to at this stage. So, Councillor Dale, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the full report. I do think a lot of progress has been made, and going back to, I think, 2013, when I came onto the Education School Improvement Committee, if you remember it. Well, I think, quite rightly, I think the Labour Party who were in control there disbanded it, because actually there was no challenge there. And I think that that was a very important thing. And I think what I would like to say is, I think going back, and I've been involved with primary schools and high schools, first schools and high schools and middle schools all a long, long time, is actually to say that, I think if I'm right, that actually when you say our first schools, I think they've always been in the top 5% of the highest Key Stage 1. So to say that they haven't been is actually a little bit unkind to the schools themselves, because a lot of the first schools in Northumberland over a long, long period have been very, very good. The ones that with High Ofsted, in Key Stage 1, that is, and then Key Stage 2, because they were middle, and that's where the problem started. So it was the middle schools and high schools that were always the issue. But actually now you've still got problems with some of the high schools. And I think that all the work you're doing is making a lot of difference. But it's like the same thing, actually improving schools takes a long time. And as you said, if you've got a good leader, you're going to get a good school. And it's actually bringing on, developing new leaders who are high and good. I mean, I've just got one of my heads who's an outstanding leader. She's been taken away to an academy to run, I think, 28 school improvements as the head of school improvement. So I'm a little bit cross about that, but no doubt you've done it elsewhere, brought them back into Northumberland. But anyway, just to say, it is good. The problem I have about the multi-academy trust, and I think that is something we need to look at more carefully, because one of the big things I had was when they brought in the academies, that actually schools were going all over the place, and it did break down along sort of, well, from not north, but from preschool all the way through to 18. We've got academies now sort of within the area, which are actually don't always work together. So you will have, a first school, second, a middle school in one academy, another one, another academy. And I can tell you all kinds of stories, but they actually don't all work together. And it is difficult sometimes getting them to work together. That is not to say they're good schools, and some of them, they're not outstanding. It's just actually getting that relationship working. So when you're setting up multi-academy, it'll be interesting to see how you do it. And we've got middle schools. My area was very keen to keep the middle schools, absolutely. And that's why we grabbed and I got them to go in the academy, so they weren't going to be picked off, because they were going to start being picked off. So, we've got one area, we've got a really good academy, which goes from the first right through to the high school. We've lost one or two, which were picked off earlier on, which were in... They had actual educational problems in the school. So it's just to be interesting. The other thing is, when you're looking at the multi-academy trust, is actually the capital programme or the government funding for academies, and to see how that relates, because I know some of our schools have found it difficult. Because they're an academy now, they're not getting capital from the school. However, you have managed to build a brand new school for one academy, which has made people cross. But actually getting the money out of the government now is quite difficult. And I've had our MPs been in to actually help one school, and thank goodness he has achieved to get some funding down, much needed funding through the government building schools fund. So I think, is that what it's called, David? I don't know. Anyway, it's the one for academies. You can't get it from whatever it's called. I can't remember what it's called. So anyway, there's lots and lots of things with education going forward that to be considered. But I do have to say, it's great to see growth like this all the way through. But it has to say, some of it started 13 to 17, and you've really moved it on. So I thank you for that.
think that was a compliment.
Sorry.
Rather than a question, I was trying to detect it.
Well, there
but there
was
was lots of
questions. I was
very
asking-
positive comments there, Councillor
But no,
Dale.
I wanted to ask about the Key Stage 1, the kids with the Key Stage 1. I also asked about the Multi-Academy Trust. If you will put it on the agenda, please. So that is a question. And also the other one was actually, could we have the could we have the KPIs, please? Because we never get KPIs now. They seem to have been hidden away. Thank you.
David.
That's a question, right?
No, that's okay. In terms of the Key Stage 1 outcomes, you're right. There is a long history with Northumberland schools doing exceptionally well at Key Stage 1. The challenge across that part of the sector has for a while been one where we've been looking at how do we maintain that into Key Stage 2 and so on.
Yeah, fine.
I think that's much less of an issue than it was in the past.
Yeah.
There are a whole host of reasons why things have changed and why things were like they were before. So I can speak to privately if you want the fine detail on that, but Key Stage 1 has always been very strong. So
I just think that we need to note that because it's an important thing.
In terms of the academy comments, I'll make a personal comment. I don't think it matters so much what it says on the door. I'm not sure if it matters whether it says academy on it or school on it or maintained school on it or church school, or those are all important elements to making some good schools, and we've got great examples of all of those schools in Northumberland now. It does come back to the quality of leadership at all levels, from head teacher right the way through to all the support staff. If the school or academy is well led, it will have good outcomes for those learners, the best outcomes that are possible. And actually, if whatever it says on the door, it might support people in some way or shape or form with a particular point of view, but it comes back to leadership from that perspective.
Thank you. So I've got Mr Hodgson and then I've got Councillor Fairless Aitken after that.
Great. Yes, I do remember 2013. I was a head teacher in Northumberland, and it was not a very pleasant place to be, and the lack of support, etc., was highlighted. So what you've done now, I think, over the last 5-10 years, so has been absolutely fantastic and well done. Just on some of the figures there, on the Ofsted inspections, am I right to think that this masks it a little bit, because what you've done is you've put together primary and secondary? If we were to actually split that, what's the picture emerging then? Is it still that we are below as far as secondary is concerned, and therefore work to be done in the school? And it all links up to the work and the involvement of the school improvement team and so on, working more closely with the secondary. Because although that is absolutely fantastic and you can see the journey that we've been on, but just below those statistics there is another picture which, as a scrutiny committee, we need to know what's being done about that. And the second question is, you're looking at possibly, I just do the maths quickly, but it's about 60-odd% of schools are involved, supported by the school improvement team. Is it the fact that there's a cost implication? Because obviously what you've done a good marketing. You've done a good hard sell on the qualities that the team has, and obviously proof's in the pudding. They've obviously worked effectively with the schools. So the question is, why aren't a third of the schools taking up this fantastic support? And is it because it's a cost implication? And if it's a cost implication, is it that some of those schools can't afford it but need the support and aren't getting it because they can't afford it?
Okay, on the first point, really about more detail on the breakdown of Ofsted inspections, it is true to say that the primary sector has been outperforming the secondary sector in terms of pure Ofsted outcomes. There aren't a huge number of secondary schools in Northumberland, so actually it only takes a couple of schools to go in one direction or another to have quite a substantial, 20% change in the outcomes there. What I can say, and Dave might want to add...
Not so much percentage as I don't need percentage, it's numbers. And if there are 6 schools that are in that sort of requires improvement stroke inadequate, it's getting those numbers down. I'm not interested in percentages, it's actually the number of individual schools, I think.
Yeah, go on, David.
There are currently 19 schools in Northumberland that are less than good, of which 9 are local authority schools, 10 are academies. There are 4 that are inadequate, and I would suggest that all 4 are on their way to being out of that category at their next inspection. So we know who all those schools are, and I could honestly say that I think all are improving. There aren't any of those 19 that I'm particularly worried about. They all still need work, but they're certainly on that journey, and I've no doubt that as Ofsted increase the number of inspections, that we will see a lot of those come out of requires improvement or inadequate. There are quite a number of those that we don't work with directly, but as David said about our relationship with academies, we know the people who work there well enough to be reassured by them that standards are improving in those schools.
And there was another question, I think, there in terms of the take-up of the SLA and why somewhere.
One of your key priorities is to increase the
number. We haven't increased the cost of the SLA for 7 years. So we have maintained it at low level. I don't think we've got any schools who are out of the SLA because of cost. On the majority of schools that are not involved directly in the purchase of the SLA, it's because they're in an academy chain which has an in-house school improvement team.
So how would you increase it? Because you're targeting to increase.
Well, we do have a MAT that are currently we've got 2 MATs that we work with where we have a bespoke package for them. So actually they are using our service as a double lock, if you like, a double check to their internal services. So there's definitely scope to do some more of that and to do things slightly differently. The other thing that we do is that there are some other elements to the SLA. So I mentioned moderation procedures, which is a statutory function. A lot of the academies, even though they might not be in the school improvement service, do buy into that because they need to have their moderation and the entrance of their end of key stage results done through us. So there is an income stream there as well.
Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's correct. The cost isn't. If we needed to cover the school monitoring brokering grant by increasing the SLA, doubling it overnight, for example, I think that might have an impact, which would be probably quite short-sighted of some of the schools to do that. But school budgets are exceptionally tight, and we have to have sympathy with head teachers and governors for trying to balance in the current financial position they're in.
Paul Rickard, did you want to come in on the question of the grant, because it might add to that bit of that strand of conversation?
I was just going to say, I don't think it is financial. I think it's reputation. And I think now, and I'll be candid, we feel we can recommend Northumberland. And I think all officers know that in the past it's not been the case. And I think that's where we've seen, and as a diocese, we now actively point our schools towards this to say, actually, there are opportunities to work with people who know what they're doing and who can see improvements. So I actually think the reputation has now gone the right way. And it's much easier to say, you know, this group know what they're doing, they've got proven track record and are strong. And historically, that wasn't always the case, but it's very different now. And that word is out there, hence the fact that we can point MATs towards you again and things like that and work quite differently. But I stress the partnership working as well is in a very different place to where it was historically. So I think that's a strength.
So on your marketing material, as endorsed by Church of England, we just need to get the Catholics on board and we've got a Holy Trinity there. So there you go.
I mean, we actually do use some of Paul's team as our external SIP team. We do work very well in close collaboration there. And the Catholic trusts, new trusts that are coming together are finding their feet a little bit, but I think that will be an opportunity as well for cross-working. And it could be a position where some of the great colleagues in the Catholic schools do a bit of work for us, and we do a bit of work for them, as we do with Paul and his team.
If only life could be as simple as this. Great. So I've got two more speakers. I've got Councillor Fellis-Aiken and then I've got Reverend Lennox.
Well, I just need to get in quicker because Councillor Dale asked my question and so did Mr Hodgson, so I just need to put my hand up earlier. But yes, I'd like to see the split as well in the schools, the first schools and the secondary schools, of the three-tier obviously, and the KPIs as well, to see behind what's going on. And my question was going to be about why hadn't people opted in? And there was 2 maintained schools that hadn't either, and was that about some, what issues were there? But that's been answered, so thank you. I'd just like to say thank you. It's a great report. I mean, clearly you were there for the schools when they needed them during the pandemic. I knew a lot of head teachers who were kind of completely at sea with what was going on above, and it's good to see the support at this level, and if the funding can be maintained at this level, I think all the better. I mean, someone wise once said that the cost of education is great, but the cost of ignorance is much greater, and if that funding can be secured here for what you've done and the work that you've done in getting those schools improved, then yes, please.
Thank you. Reverend Lennox.
Scrutiny Committee always relies upon the data given to us over the years. It's been presented in various ways. There's no doubt about this morning we've seen a significant improvement from 2017 according to the data that's been presented to us. And I guess there's a number of factors that we've heard this morning, but is there any one single factor that stands out that has resulted in these figure changes?
David, do you want to take that one?
I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record. It's the improvement in the quality of leadership across our schools and settings and colleges, and that constant increase, sharing of best practice, training and development, getting working groups together who have similar interests and similar needs, focusing really strongly on the individual child, developing our special schools alongside the mainstream schools, but under this umbrella of leadership, in that open and transparency as well, I suppose. In the past, where people might have kept their thing to themselves, we know the school's much better, so it's a bit more in the open anyway. It's a bit harder to hide something, but that leaders have, if they don't know immediately who to call, they can call somebody who will help them immediately.
Could I just follow that up?
Absolutely.
Interesting you should say that, because many years ago in Northumberland, one of its strengths was the fact that schools were working together and supporting each other. And where there was help needed, it was a factor, particularly in the secondary sector, where, they could rely upon the support one with another. I suspected that deteriorated over time. And it's good, I think, what we see here coming through is this idea of being able to support one another in that context.
Got any more? John Sanderson.
Yep, I'll endorse it. It's an excellent report. Just to comment on supporting schools through the pandemic, clearly leaders were very well supported. My impression that staff in schools also felt very supported. I had very little traffic during the course of the pandemic. When we did have a concern, we were able to refer them back to the head teachers where they had a conversation, and as a rule, they got things sorted. So that's great. I was here in 2000, well, I've been here a while, and things have clearly improved. We know where we've been, we know where we are. I think the big question is, as Paul says, it's a question over the funding. We know where we want to be, and we need to maintain that. So we need to find some way of maintaining the funding for this excellent service.
I've got a guy who just wanted to come in very quickly, and then I've got Councillor Dale.
GCSE and A-level results. Obviously, it's very difficult to compare that over the last 2 years because the pandemic has changed everything. And you'd almost have to go back and compare to pre-pandemic levels. And then, of course, you get the government changing the parameters for what is a B, a C, a D, a 1, a 2, a 3, or 4, whatever they are. So they're very difficult to compare, which is why we went for the percentage of Ofsted ratings rather than looking at exam results. But coming out of the pandemic, as we go back into a more normal school environment, I think we will be able to look back at exam results and hopefully see an upward trend, but we're not there yet.
Councillor Dunn.
Can I just make one remark just very quickly, is that it has taken time, and I think, David, how long have you been here, and sort of both of you?
6 years, I think now.
How many? 6? I remember coming when I changed the school round, you saying, oh, what am I going to do? Anyway, we got it done, and it's now gone up like that. But I know you were back both there, so it would be 2016, something like that. Yes. Anyway, just to say thank you, but actually it's to note that actually changes can't be made that quickly. And we've had with schools, schools take time to make the changes you need. And I know that from my own having working. And the work you've done is actually to just maintain, but to keep and improve on all the work you've done year after year. And I think that's exceptionally difficult in education. So I have to say, that's good. And the main thing is we keep this standard of improvement up. Because that's your challenge now, because you've done, it's gone up like that. And now you've got to keep on going rather than levelling out, which I'm not being unkind, but it is. It's always a challenge when the higher you get, the more difficult it becomes.
There'll be absolutely no resting on our laurels. We're acutely aware of where we've got challenging areas, and we are intensely focused on them. Yes, we've got a track record of success in some of the areas we've looked at so far, but there are further challenges to come, and we're going to be full on getting those improvements made as both robustly so that they stand the test of time, but also as rapidly as possible.
Audrey.
Thank you, Chair. Just to give some further assurance to the committee, so we don't just look at these percentages, we look at the number of children who are also attending good or outstanding schools. That's routinely part of our corporate KPI reporting. Guy, as lead member for Children's Services, receives that every month, and Graham and I go through all of the education data and all of the social care data. So we are routinely looking at this. The education strategy, to go back to our previous report, you will see in there that every phase and every aspect is covered in the priorities. The team look at that regularly. We have an internal scorecard that we review half-termly at our senior management team, and we actually have an objective performance team in Alan Hartwell who presents that data to us that we discuss and review routinely. So always very keen to I call it bake and slice the data in as many different ways that we possibly can, so that we're making sure there isn't an aspect that we're not aware of and we need to be focusing on it. Thank you.
I just want to, I'm not seeing any other hands, so I just want to draw a couple of points together. I mean, this is part of the reason why I was really keen that we had this presentation here, because what it does demonstrate is the significant impact that the school improvement team has had on our school network in the county. Because as people are aware, there was, it was perceived as a bit of a basket case. And now we've absolutely got the evidence here to prove that putting investment into leadership equates to then schools being led well, which results in those Ofsted results. But it's also, I think, about the service is respected. And that's a big thing in leadership, is actually having respect from schools and your peers. So that, I think, is worth noting. On the point about the pandemic, I think sometimes we forget we've had a pandemic. Because I remember sitting in my office in 2020 when the call came through that schools were going to shut. And schools had to close, reopen, make themselves COVID secure, open themselves up to key workers within hours. And we forget the dynamism and leadership that those school heads showed during that period. and not just the leaders, you know, everyone down to the catering staff, the domestics, everybody was involved in that, making that happen. So we sometimes forget about what massive support this authority gave to them, and they also gave to us in terms of supporting key workers. And whilst we've been talking about this funding issue, so I'm going to get on my high horse here about school improvement grant. Why would I do anything else but that? So I just Googled the Local Government Association. There's a really good article about this. And what it says is the government said that because local authorities' role is changing and more areas are having academy-led school approaches with dynamic leadership from them, with strong schools and strong leaders, we don't need to do this anymore. Well, if we'd had that situation a few years back, remember Hayden Bridge was going to close. And you know, Hayden Bridge with Bright Tribe, I'll use those two disgusting words, I'll say it's on camera, they can sue me. Bright Tribe, who came and failed and let down our community in the West. And that school was saved by this local authority, including intervention by this local authority to turn it around. Now, I think there is a case for us, and I know Guy's sitting here, but I was going to put nice words and saying, oh, we urge the Cabinet to do this. No. I think we should send a note from this Scrutiny Committee recommending that Cabinet fund the school improvement team till the end of the administration, which is 2025. It's a 4-year term. And I think that, and I would hope that everyone would agree that that would be a sensible thing to do. And I think you can take a very strong message to Cabinet Guy that this works. And by withdrawing the funding, the government are being completely short-sighted. And if you want to know what the money's worth, it's a 50 million national pot, right? Don't get me started on money that's being wasted. But let me give you 2 examples. Lancashire gets 1.1 million. Hampshire County Council gets 965,000. They're the top recipients of funding. We're not talking about a huge amount of money here for Northumberland. And it is a totally short-sighted plan to cut it on the basis that everybody is going to academise, because actually not everybody is going to academise, and it doesn't matter, as we've heard today, it doesn't matter whether you're an academy or a maintained school, it doesn't matter what your structure is, a free school, you are part of the family, and that family involves support. So I would hope that people would agree that we recommend to Cabinet that they fund the team until at least the end of the administration, which is really all we can ask for, and that the team continues to develop and to offer the support that it needs to our schools. And I would actually hope that we would actually go and offer support to schools outside of our area as well, because that, to me, what we've seen here is a demonstration that get the right leaders, get the right structure, you can offer that support. So I would hope that I would have the support of members on that. I'm seeing lots of nods, so that's really good. So, on that point, we've been asked to do 5 key things this morning, which is review the performance. I think we've asked lots of questions. We're going to get some data back. I think we've had lots of comments about the ability of the team to deliver education improvement. We've given some direction, and I think part of that is around that recommendation to Cabinet that the team is funded until at least the end of this administration's term, 2025, fully. Note the changes of funding imposed by DFE. We've had that discussion that links in with that one. And also that we will get updates for future facts. So on that basis, I think we've done that. So I want to do this because this is really important. Can I please have a show of hands that were in support of actually getting that recommendation through to Cabinet? That is unanimous, and if that can be recorded as such, Chris, and if you can tell Cabinet as well, Guy. So, thank you very much to the team, and please, I think on behalf of Facts, please pass on to everyone who's involved in the school improvement team our huge appreciation and vote of thanks for everything that they're doing, and well done to you and the 2 Davids and Audrey in the team to actually make this happen. So thank you very much for that. Can I also ask one other thing as well? Very helpfully in the report we've had a copy of the presentation which is on there, because this touches every single county councillor in Northumberland. I'd really like that presentation to be shared to all members if we could, please, by email. with a note of explaining what it is, because I think it's so important that members understand the role that the school improvement team has on the lives of every one of our constituents. So if that could happen, Chris. Right, we're now moving on to item number 8 on the agenda, which is the work programme and monitoring report. So Chris Angus, you're going to take us through that.
Thanks, Chair. There's a number of changes to the July agenda on the work programme. So the education funding for residential and commercial builds has been deferred to October. The Northumberland inclusion strategy has been deferred till September, but the other 3 reports on there will still go ahead, and obviously there'll be the addition of the recommission of the integrated sexual health service that will be coming to facts before Cabinet. So there'll be those 4 reports on there. There's the sexual health service, the SEND strategy, the finance and performance, and the fostering annual report will be there in July. And that's sort of the only thing I really wanted to highlight on there.
And of course, the October...
In October, we'll have the Regional Schools Commissioner coming to discuss academies with us. Yeah.
And we'll obviously send a briefing note ahead of that meeting to members about the parameters of what that meeting will be about. Right, final item on the agenda, urgent business. I've not been informed of any. Does anyone have any? No, I'm not seeing any hands. So, on that basis, thank you very much for this morning's meeting. It's been really productive and as ever very informative as well. So thank you very much for everyone for attending this morning. Thank you.